You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
It's The Word podcast with a difference. Mark Allen's away on his holidays. And Alex Gold is in Portland, Oregon, Alex, where you took a scarifying plane journey yesterday. Tell us about that.
I did. I embarked on a plane that was made of Lego and flew around a whole mountain.
Now, it wasn't Lego. It was a Cessna, wasn't it? This is a seriously small plane. So it's what, the pilot and you and your girlfriend. Is that right?
Yeah. It was bought for me as a lovely surprise present.
You sent me a picture of you during the flight. You didn't look as if you were enjoying the surprise massively. You looked absolutely terrified, and I would have been also.
Well, I was a bit distracted because I was sort of willing us to stay in the air. As soon as we got halfway through, and the pilot told us we were starting to make our descent. That's when I felt confident.
Your heart was singing when he said we're going back down again. You thought, this is the bit of the journey that I can enjoy because I know we're going back. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I thought if we could make 50% and be alive and in the air, then everything is basically going to be okay. So once we hit that mark, I was kind of fine. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that we survived it by my sheer force of willing us to stay in the air. But they're so small. They're so small. And the check-in process is about 15 minutes. So you go to a normal commercial airport, right? 2 hours, and it's all kind of really, really sort of proper and stringent. 15 minutes. You scan a QR code, type your name in, put your weight in, and then you're introduced to a man called KJ, which is always a cause for alarm, I feel. And you get straight in. But that whole plane was lighter than my suitcase, I think.
It's the weight issue. Now, I've never done this in a small plane, and I wouldn't. No, not in a small plane, no.
We did it with the Ukes in Alaska a few years ago.
Oh, really? Well, I've never done this, but let me tell you, I once took a helicopter flight from Kennedy Airport into Manhattan.
Helicopter?
Yes, it was part of the deal. You know, if you flew a certain class or whatever, I can't remember which airline it was, but you got a helicopter flight. And so you board a helicopter, quite a big helicopter, the sort of thing that would
like a Chinook.
Yes, it would probably carry 30 people or something like that. And you get in there and the noise is deafening, and there's guys with kind of ear defenders on and so forth. And there was a little old lady sitting on the seat in front of me. And I mean a little old lady, like a bird, this lady. And this guy who was boarding the plane, who was in charge of us, he got hold of her and he moved her about 2 feet down the seat. Now, I thought any craft which depends for its stability on this tiny little old lady sitting there rather than there is something I prefer not to be aboard. You know what I mean? I don't like that feeling at all. I'm really not good at this kind of thing. Well, I think you were very brave to have gone up on it.
Well, I had no choice. I wasn't brave. I was sort of committed. It was a present, and it was a lovely gesture. So I couldn't really go back on it. But we tried in January. I was over here in January when the weather was terrible, and my lovely lady was telling me that she had a surprise in store for me, and I was expecting something in a box, maybe a puppy. And we went on a drive, and we got closer and closer to this airfield, and I was thinking, I hope it's not a flight. It can't be a flight, surely, because these things, it's not a thing in the UK, is it? Nobody takes light aircrafts in the UK. Because
nobody confuses that with pleasure at all. You see, that's the thing about abroad. That's the thing about abroad. Have you ever been to New Zealand? I've only been in New Zealand once. It's a wonderful, lovely country, beautiful in loads of ways. But you drive down the road in New Zealand, rural New Zealand, and you will not go far along the road in rural New Zealand before you will pass a sign inviting you to go down a little road and risk your life in some way. That's the amusement in New Zealand. That's why they invented bungee jumping. You know what I mean? Which is insane. I do not confuse excitement with pleasure at all. I don't like it on any level. And so I'm sorry, I would have just turned on my heel and said, I'm sorry, I'm not doing this. We've got a lovely relationship, but I'm afraid it's got to end at this point. But, that's just me. I'm just a coward, and I haven't done it, and I won't be doing it in the future.
I thought about that, and I sort of resigned myself to the notion. It's kind of a binary concept for me, because I thought, I could not do it, but then I would be cross with myself, and I would be disappointed in myself. And I figured that, if worse comes to worse, and I spent half a day researching famous people who have perished in plane crashes, at least it will be quick. So I felt like I didn't really have anything to lose, apart, I'd be most cross about not being able to do the pod this morning, actually. But my reasoning was that, if all absolutely went to the dogs, then I probably wouldn't even have time to notice. Is that flawed logic? It is, isn't it?
It is very flawed logic.
Is that a desperate man's logic?
Absolutely, I can't believe how your brain functions. Anyway, let's move to the comparatively prosaic subject of the Independent, not a newspaper anymore, is it? Choosing to fill the dog days of August. The riots having disappointingly stopped after a couple of days, so they're all scrambling around thinking, "How do we fill these pages during August?
Where's the news?
Where's the news?" They come up with the 25 most overrated albums ranked.
Okay.
From Nirvana's In Utero to the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at this, because for a start, it's a very kind of odd list, in the sense that I find it hard to believe that anybody in the world has heard all these records, and so might be in a position to say whether they're disappointing or not. Because at number 25, just to give you an idea, number 25, you got Madonna's Confessions on a Dance Floor. I didn't realize that was rated, let alone, overrated. Then number 24, of course, Sgt. Pepper. And then number 23, Billie Eilish. And, number 22, PJ Harvey. And number 20. And then you go David Bowie's Low, White Stripes, Elephant. Self-Esteem, U2, Songs of Innocence, Taylor Swift, Bruce Springsteen, Letter to You, Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks. It's just, you can't put together a list like that nowadays, can you? And assume that anybody will have heard of all of them. Do you think that's fair to say?
I think that we live in a time where nobody really listens to albums in full anyway. So it's kind of irrelevant, isn't it? But surely U2's Songs of Innocence is a no-brainer, because that was just put into people's iPods, wasn't it?
Was that was it? Okay,
yeah. That was the one that Bono just forced upon people.
So that was officially proven to be the least popular album of all time, because this is the only case in the history of recorded sound where they gave a record to people and people actively gave it back, didn't they?
It was kind of the equivalent of my plane trip, wasn't it, in audible form?
Yes, it was. Yes, you have delighted us enough. And people were sending their iPods back, whether they are iPhones or whatever. They were so outraged about the idea.
Really cross with it, yeah.
That was the point at which the kind of records ceased being a really desirable consumer good, and suddenly become a bit of a pain in the backside, didn't they? People didn't like the idea of being given them at all.
But it strikes me there are two types of present in this world. There are presents that you are delighted to be given, apropos of nothing, and there are presents that you are absolutely, mortified at being given, apropos of nothing. And an album, is one of those presents. Everybody's really pleased to have to receive a cake as a surprise, right? But a U2 album is not something that.
This is why the single greatest present is the thing that used to be part. No, I'm going to go back bigger than socks.
Really?
For years, bigger than socks. For all of my life up until about 20 years ago, the single greatest Christmas present, birthday present of any kind, that you could ever get was a record token. It was a brilliant thing because you couldn't spend it on anything other than a record, and you were always delighted to spend it on a record. And so your agent auntie whose choice of a record would not necessarily be the one that would chime with you could nonetheless give you a record token, and you were happy and she was happy.
No, that's fair enough. But that gives you some agency over the type of present you want to get. Like, it's a bit like a £15 W.H. Smith voucher, which you would spend on a record.
Of course you would.
But being forced, I suppose music's quite parochial as well, isn't it? People hold their music taste very close to their hearts. If you're being given an album by a band that you are absolutely not a fan of,
Well, I don't dislike U2 at all, but I found the idea of being given one that I hadn't asked for really irritating. It did not make them any more popular, did it? In fact, it significantly, had the opposite effect on the popularity. So going back to this list, I'm up to 11. Arctic Monkeys, and then the 1975, and then we're in the top 10. Jeff Buckley's Grace, Coldplay Parachutes, Nirvana in Utero, Led Zeppelin 4, and then talk about a pathetic term. You go from Led Zeppelin 4 to Florence and the Machine Lungs, and then you go Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band Troutmouse Replica, The Horrors Primary Colors, and then Radiohead Kid A, and then finally the most overrated, apparently, according to this, the most overrated record ever made is, can you guess, Alex? Yeah. Well, I don't know whether you have even heard it. Interpol's Turn on the Bright Lights.
Oh, yeah.
Is it?
That's, maybe the indiest record ever made. So I'm very familiar with that. Actually, I would agree with most of those.
Right, okay.
Weirdly. Am I supposed to? I don't know, but
I
would agree.
Because what I was going to say, what struck me about this was that underrated and overrated and celebrated, they're all just shades of the same thing, really, which is...
I don't...
No, but once you decide, those records, I don't know all of them, but I know enough of them, I mean, when people do the list of the greatest albums ever made or whatever, they populate those lists with records that appear to have great significance, that appear to have some kind of cultural reverberation behind them. They were the first, or they changed something. And therefore, these records are recorded kind of celebrity, which means that in many ways, we very often stop listening to them altogether. We just approve of them. We like what they represent because we are that kind of person, and therefore they probably are all, in one sense or another, overrated. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, hugely significant at the time, has been significant ever since. He's probably overrated. Probably is. But that's just part of being rated. Whereas A Hard Day's Night, not overrated, because people just don't think about it. You know what I mean? It's certain kind of records that people get very reverent towards are the kind of things that tend to be overrated.
I would argue that all your favourite records unlock a door to a part of yourself that you hadn't yet discovered. And I would suggest that these records on this list. So, for example, Arctic Monkeys. I, as you know, I am an indie person. I'm a man of indie. I'm meant to like all of the indie. I've never really understood the Arctic Monkeys. They've always left me a little bit cold, but I'm supposed to like them an awful lot. And every single Arctic Monkeys record that I've purchased and consumed, I've expected to discover this hitherto unexplored place of myself and the universe as we know it. And I've always been left a little bit disappointed by it. I don't feel like I've come out of those records having discovered anything new. And so therefore it makes sense to me that, it is a bit underwhelming and disappointing and overrated because I expected a lot more than I got out of it, if that makes sense. These records they're kind of mirrors to the self, aren't they, really? Florence is the same thing. So I've always felt I really like Florence. However, I feel like listening to an hour of Florence is like putting your head against a foghorn for 60 minutes and, just leaving it there. There's no gear change at all. And I feel like 3 minutes of Florence is fantastic, but 60 minutes of Florence with no sort of dynamic shift is, again...
A bit more than you. She has delighted us long enough. That's what you feel.
Yeah. No encore, please, Florence.
No, absolutely.
So I can sort of understand that. And I suppose Cadet as well, really. Cadet was all about the concept, wasn't it? But does anybody really love Cadet? Has anybody...
I've no idea.
Is it a record that, you're at a party and somebody gets up and goes, right, we need this one now? It's not, is it really? I don't know. I can understand these records of whelm that don't leave you underwhelmed, don't leave you overwhelmed, but just like your levels of whelm just stay disappointingly consistent.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, as much sense as anything. And I suppose, then the main point of publishing a list of the 25 most overrated albums of all time during the dog days of August is so that people should disagree with you and thereby generate a load of clicks on your website.
Can I ask if Oasis's "Be Here Now" is on that list?
I didn't see it there at all.
Well, then that list is surely wrong, isn't it?
Well, that's clearly number 26. Now, talking of Oasis, there's been a lot of scuttlebutt in the last week or so.
Scuttlebutt? I
yes,
love that word.
about the likelihood of them reforming. Do you give this any credence, Alex? You're the expert on Oasis.
As Word New Ear's existing Oasis correspondent, I can tell you. Well, actually, my theory is that when there's enough zeros on that check, it will happen, because we both know that they both enjoy money. I think they're playing the long game, but the thing is, they've both got very successful solo careers. They don't need to do it; they can afford to bide their time. But we live in an age where everybody reforms these days. Everybody. Stone Roses, Fleetwood Mac, Pink Floyd. The only thing that prevents a reformation in 2024 is the expiration of life. And as long as the Gallaghers live and breathe, an Oasis reunion will definitely be on the cards at some point. I think they're playing the long game. They don't need to right now. But, it's probably going to be the most anticipated reunion in Western culture. I think they will.
Well, okay. Well, they're probably the last group that anybody thinks about reforming that hasn't already reformed. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think so. I don't want to see them reform, though.
Why do you want to see them reform?
Well, I think it was you that was talking about a little while ago about bands being youth concepts or not youth concepts. And to me, Oasis are a youth concept. Look,
yeah, they're not the elderly bloke concept.
No, you don't want to see Liam hobbling on after 2 hip operations, singing, cigarettes and alcohol.
I don't think they're that far gone yet, are they? But they're probably get a move on.
No,
get a move on.
They are. Liam had a double hip replacement.
Oh, did he? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was when the dream died for me.
So
you can't have that.
In further Oasis news, the one of the things that I think brought this story back to the boil was the appearance of Gene Gallagher, son of Liam. Made a record.
Son of Liam. That makes him sound very Game of Thrones. Right. Gene Gallagher, son of Liam. Right. Winter is coming.
Yes. So, what chance do you give, any of the Gallagher offspring taking up the mantle themselves and becoming the next, the next Rufus Wainwright or whatever famous offspring?
I've listened to his band and they're perfectly fine. I don't think he's doing anything wrong musically. You could bring out the old Nepo baby argument, whatever. But I think by having him on tour, Liam's just helping his child, which is what you do as a parent. And I don't think he'd have him on if he was
take your
rubbish.
son to work and so forth.
So bring your child to the office day.
I've never given any of my children a job.
No, but his band's perfectly good, and you know they're perfectly capable of handling a big stage, and that's fine. You know, he's clearly inherited the gift to some degree, but I don't think there's any mantle to take up because bands are never going to change the world again. So, you know, he won't be the next Oasis.
So bands are never going to change the world again. You heard it here first from Alex Gold. That's good to know. Alex, do you know what I did this week while you're in Portland, Oregon? I walked the length of Oxford Street. And Oxford Street's always been a part of my life. You know, I worked in Oxford Street, worked in shops in Oxford Street. I used to have an office overlooking Oxford Street near Oxford Circus. For years, you know, so Oxford Street was a huge part of my life, came in via Oxford Circus, you know. And, you know, if you take in the 80s and 90s in Oxford Street was just full of shop opportunities, you know, and
opportunities.
And many of them bookshops and record shops. So if you went out at lunchtime to get a sandwich, in those days, it was quite likely you'd come back with a CD and a book and a magazine, or you'd go to Borders, or you'd go to the H&V shop, or Virgin, or Zavvi, or whatever, all these kind of places. And I walked the length of it the other day. And I don't think it's quite as bad as it was a couple of years ago, because as far as I can see, those kind of awful American candy stores, which infested the place for a while, appear to have been kind of taxed out of existence, or they'd done whatever they needed to do to get rid of them. But, you know, there are still empty stores down there. And you know, of the ones that, you know, used to be there, the only ones that seem to be remaining that I could see were Selfridges, which is very different nowadays, very successful, very different. John Lewis, the same as it ever was. But what I couldn't believe is that there'd been this kind of extraordinary turnover of shops. So many of the old familiar names had just gone, been driven out of business. But there was one business in the whole of Oxford Street that is still doing business at the same place that it started doing business in, I think, 1964. Or if you were to go back with it under a slightly different name to 1942.
1942.
And that's a place that you and I went in not all that long ago. Do you know what it is, Alex?
Together at the same time?
Yes. You, me, and Mark Ellen. We went in and had a look at it.
Ooh.
Well, I'm going to tell you, because you're never going to think of it. The 100 Club. The 100 Club.
Oh, of course.
The 100 Club. It's absolutely astonishing when you think about it.
It's still ticking.
You walk the length of Oxford Street and you think, well, there used to be, I don't know, Dulcis, or that used to be Top Man, or whatever. And that, Miss Selfridge has gone, Topshop has gone. I mean, it's amazing to think Topshop has gone, but yet the 100 Club.
I've got nowhere to get skinny jeans from these days, and it's absolutely crucifying. But you know what happened with the 100 Club, didn't you? The 100 Club got bought out by Converse, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they saved it. It was under threat of closure a few years ago, and it very nearly went under. But Converse, well, Nike, actually, the parent company, bought it out, and they own it. Yeah, I don't think I'm wrong on that front. I think, so that's why it's still there. That's why it's still there.
It's extraordinary. It's still there, and it's, you know, it started in the war. It wasn't called the 100 Club at first. It started as a jazz club during the war. And changed to the 100 Club in 1964. So it was, you know, it saw the beat boom, it saw punk rock, it saw ska, it saw, you know, all kinds of musical movements and revivals and so forth. and it's still there at 100 Oxford Street. And of course, the other great thing is because it's named after the address, they can't change the bloody name, which I have to say I'm all in favour of.
Oh,
because
100%.
I was reminded of this week when the insurance group Alliance with a Z, Alliance, German, I think, or probably multinational, like all these things. They paid, and I think I'm right in saying, £100 million for the rights, the naming rights for Twickenham, the rugby stadium at Twickenham, which I think is just insane, because nobody's going to stop calling it Twickenham just because you called it Alliance. They're just not going to do it at all, because Twickenham doesn't just mean the place. It refers to the kind of English rugby establishment and years of tradition and so forth. Why would you ever want to change that? I cannot possibly see. And the kind of ego of corporate people with huge amounts of money to spend on sponsorship is just staggers me. And
does it really make a difference? I've never understood it. I mean, would you? I mean, imagine a world where Lords was taken, was renamed the Marks and Spencer Cricket Ground.
I think it's a very interesting point. I don't know if Lords is. Yeah, it probably hasn't got sponsorship. But the Oval, I think, has got sponsorship, but it's still known as something Oval.
It's still the Oval, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still the Oval. You can't do anything. And I thought, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, Hammersmith Odeon, I don't care. They can call it the end eventim Apollo till the crack of doom. It will still be the Hammersmith Odeon to me, and you will never change it at all. And the most staggering case of this, I realise this, because I go past it quite frequently, and I think we were talking about it recently, is whenever I come out of Finsbury Park Station and I look up at that kind of white former cinema on the corner of Seven Sisters Road and whatever that road is that goes down towards Holloway, there's only one thing that goes through my mind is that's the rainbow. Now, the rainbow ceased being the rainbow in the late 70s or maybe have you ever been to a music gig at the Rainbow, Alex? You're a youngster. You haven't. No.
No, I haven't actually.
It will be before your time. And yet, to me, and I would say to thousands like me, that's still the rainbow. And you will never shift that idea at all. You simply won't do it. So I don't know why anybody would bother spending £100 million on thinking that they can get people to refer to Twickenham as something different. I go further, actually. I think it should be against the law to change the names of things. I think it should be against the law to change the names of hotels. Old hotels.
Oh, okay.
Like the Hyde Park Hotel, the Savoy, the Ritz, whatever. They are what they are. They are their name. Why the hell would you change that? They're landmarks. Don't go messing with our kind of mental map of the place. What's the point? You're not going to get us to think of it in your terms. So just leave us alone. Put your money in your pocket.
The Word Podcast. Prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
The film about Bob Dylan, starring Timothee Chalamet, is coming soon. The trailers are all over the internet. I don't know if you've managed to see any of them. Have you?
I've seen snatches, on the gram.
Okay. I just wanted to know, I was interested to see how much you knew about Bob Dylan, Alex. If you had to give us if you had to tell a Martian about Bob Dylan, what would you do? What would be the salient points? And don't go off mic. Because I could see you turning head away. Come on.
Well, I think Bob Dylan is one of a select group of musicians that's sort of preserved in amber by virtue of an impression. So Bob Dylan to me Bob Dylan to me is this voice.
It's that noise. That's an interesting point.
That's Bob Dylan.
So Bob Dylan, that's a really interesting point. Bob Dylan is primarily, he kind of continues in contemporary culture as an impression. It's like people might do Charlie Chaplin or
Paul McCartney.
Or Mae West or whatever.
All right, yeah.
It's a really interesting point. People can do Bob Dylan. Nobody can do Paul Simon in the same way, can they? Whereas Bob Dylan, it's a load of idiosyncrasies, isn't it? That's an interesting point.
And that kind of thing is reserved for a very special pantheon of artists. And, I don't believe you've really made it unless somebody can do an impression of you. And, so Bob Dylan really is like a non-musical audible concept to me, really. Right. If I break him down. That's the essence of him. Obviously, I know a little bit about him. I've never dived headfirst into his catalogue, really. So I'm not, I would not say that I'm a Bob Dylan connoisseur by any stretch. In fact, the first time I heard his first album was I went through the list of albums from your book, and I listened to one every night in the dark. Right. Yeah, it was the first time I heard Dark Side of the Moon as well. But what struck me was his incredible range.
Oh, yeah.
It's got an amazing vocal range, and I don't think anybody really realises that.
Well, I realised that. Mark Ellen realises that, but people don't give him sufficient credit for that.
Yeah.
It is astonishing, because I look at Timothée Chalamet doing him in the trailer, and I just think, this is pointless. You can't do this,
He's so singular. I don't think you can.
As he sang on a recent album, I Contain Multitudes. And he kind of does, really, because nobody's going to give an idea of the kind of dimensions of Bob Dylan. It's beyond an actor doing this. It's really funny because, look, having seen the trailer, I went and watched this week a film which I do like. I rewatched it, which is the Coen brothers Inside Llewyn Davis. Okay. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but basically it's one of their...
It's not Marvel, so no.
No, well, there you go. It's polar opposite from Marvel. And it's about Llewyn Davis, who is a kind of would-be folk music star trying to get ahead in 1962 in Greenwich Village, and trying to meet the managers, trying to meet the bookers, trying to play the same circuit and so forth. And, he's kind of all right. He's just all right. He's talented, but not exceptionally. And what he is very unpleasant, which makes it interesting. And anyway, they have a very good device at the end of the film for convincing you why he hasn't made it and why he never will make it, which is that he's being beaten up in an alley after a gig, and you hear coming in from the club the sound of the young singer who has succeeded him on the stage, and that sound is Bob Dylan. It's a lesser-known Bob Dylan recording from about 1962 or something. And you suddenly hear something that makes all the music you've heard in the film sound really one-dimensional by comparison. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's the extraordinary thing about Bob Dylan. His ability to communicate personality vocally is just absolutely extraordinary, and was at the age of 22, and kind of still is now, oddly. And
I have a theory that singing isn't about singing at all. It's not about technical prowess. It's about being able to communicate a sentiment and send a message in a particular way. And that's why even though I don't know an awful lot about him, I still rate Bob Dylan as one of the greatest singers of all time. And Joe Strummer as well, actually. These are not singers that you'd put on any top 100 singers lists, but their ability to enunciate, like squeeze so much nuance out of every single syllable. You know, is unmatchable.
You see, but I think it goes further with Bob Dylan, because the nearest parallel I can think, and it's not a musical one, is Jack Nicholson. So you put Jack Nicholson in any movie, good, bad, or indifferent, you can't take your eyes off him. You simply can't take your eyes off him. You give him the simplest thing to do, and he does it in a more magnetic way than 99% of actors would ever do. And he bring a lot of that is not necessarily in the script or the direction or anything. It's what he's brought to the party. And what he brings to the party is he has 3 times as much personality as any other human being. And that's Bob Dylan. You know, when he's singing, there's a bigger person in the room. You know what I mean? And that was the thing that they magically managed in Inside Llewyn Davis by putting that at the end of the film. Is you suddenly hear the young Bob Dylan and the hairs on the back of your neck go up.
Did you see that film they made a few years ago with Kate Blanchett and?
No, I never saw that. What's it called? I'm Not Here or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like that concept suits him a lot better. As you say,
Really?
you know, he's very multifaceted. I mean, I think Timothee Chalamet is a very good actor. Actually, I had a double dose of him on the plane over here. I watched Dune 2, and then I watched Wonka. Two diametrically opposing films, and he was fantastic in both of them. But I don't think you know. I don't think he's not got the depth to portray all the aspects of Bob Dylan that a fan would want to see. You know,
it's like if you were the best actor in the world and somebody said, "Okay, can you be Jack Nicholson?" I don't think you can. I don't care how good you are. I don't think you can do that. You know what I mean? I don't think you can depict a performer in that way. I don't think it lends itself to kind of you are smaller than that performer. You know, you can be the best actor in the world.
I think there's a parallel in a way with being a Beatles tribute artist, because you know you're kind of you're catching a snapshot of the most familiar aspects of that person at a particular point in time, right?
Yeah.
You know,
just one little bit, yes.
Just a little bit, because you want to make that person recognizable to the people that have come to see them. You know, but the person that you're a fan of is 100 different people, and it's absolutely impossible to capture that in any meaningful form across any art form that isn't a long-form TV show. That's another thing. I don't think Bob Dylan can be captured in a film, really, accurately. It's a long-form TV concept. You need to see the development of Bob Dylan as a character between, you know, Highway 61 or whatever, and Here Comes Santa Claus, you know, and welding, you know. You need to see the whole caboodle, don't you?
That's good.
Because
that's good. I would sign up for that, Alex. And I think also it would be richly comic to see exactly that progress that you talk about. I'm entirely in favour of that, Alex. I'll sign up for that. In fact, I'm going to go away. I'm going to go away and write the concept right now. Okay, we've spoken enough. I'm going off to have my dinner in the UK. What are you doing in Portland, Oregon next?
Well, I've just had breakfast made for me, and then we're going to farmers market.
All right. Okay. You youngsters, crazy rock and roll. Cheers.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.